Saddam Hussein's two sons once held real power in Iraq. They evaded an enormous search by the US military, but in the end they were betrayed by one of the relatives they trusted most. July 2003, Mosul, Iraq. A fierce battle broke out around a seemingly ordinary villa. Hidden inside were two of America's most wanted fugitives, Saddam Hussein's sons, Uday Hussein and Qusay Hussein. After the fall of Baghdad, Saddam and his sons disappeared without a trace. US troops spread across Iraq and launched a massive manhunt. The military hoped the brothers would surrender voluntarily, but instead they chose armed resistance. After 6 hours of intense fighting, Uday and Qusay were buried beneath the ruins of the villa. So how did the US military find their hiding place? And who betrayed the two brothers? The story began on March 20th, 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq. The main objective was to overthrow Saddam Hussein's regime. In only 3 weeks, American forces captured Baghdad. Saddam's rule appeared to be over, but Saddam Hussein, together with his two sons, Uday and Qusay, suddenly disappeared from Iraq. Uday was born on June 18, 1964. As Saddam's eldest son, he was widely expected to become his successor. But Uday was violently unpredictable. His criminal behavior was so extreme that even Saddam Hussein was troubled by it. His cruelty and violent conduct made him widely feared across Iraq. In 1988, at a party, Uday beat a man to death. The victim was one of Saddam's personal attendants. After that incident, Saddam gradually removed Uday from the center of political power. Even so, Uday still controlled important positions. He ran the Iraqi Olympic Committee and influenced meetings and domestic media. Qusay was Saddam's second son. His personality was almost the opposite of Uday's. He was quiet, careful, and far more restrained. Because Saddam trusted him, Qusay controlled much of the regime's real power. Iraqi intelligence, the secret police, military operations, the Republican Guard, and special security forces all fell under his authority. After the Gulf War ended in 1991, insurgency spread across Iraq against Saddam Hussein. Qusay was placed in charge of suppressing the unrest. But in April 2003, Baghdad came fully under US military control. The Americans began hunting Saddam's senior leaders. They created a list of 52 of his most loyal officials. But many of those men had already vanished. To help soldiers recognize the fugitives, the US military created wanted playing cards. Saddam was printed as the king, and his sons were among the highest value targets. Soldiers memorized the faces while playing. Over the following months, US forces captured many of Saddam's former allies. But Saddam himself could not be found. Neither could Uday or Qusay. The US government then offered enormous rewards. Information leading to the two brothers was worth $30 million. 15 million for each son. Information leading to Saddam himself could bring a $25 million reward. At the time, this was the largest cash reward in history. American forces dropped leaflets, showed the brothers on television, and searched homes. Relatives were questioned and some family members were detained, but none of these efforts produced useful information. The military then focused on Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. For years, Mosul had been a stronghold of Saddam's Ba'ath Party. Most local residents supported Saddam and deeply resented the US military. American commanders believed that Mosul would be the perfect place for the brothers to hide. At first, Uday and Qusay constantly changed safe houses. Local loyalists sheltered them, even though everyone understood the danger. After many moves, the brothers entered the home of Nawaf Zeidan. Zeidan was a businessman and a distant relative of Saddam Hussein. He had worked with Saddam's family for years, so the two brothers trusted him. His villa stood in a residential area of Mosul. It looked ordinary and attracted little attention, but behind its thick walls were two of Iraq's most wanted fugitives. They were accompanied by bodyguards and Qusay's 14-year-old son, Mustafa. Wherever Qusay went, he took his son with him. He feared the Americans would use the boy against him. For a time, the villa seemed like a safe hiding place. But while the military made no progress, Nawaf Zeidan began to feel trapped. The reward was enormous. Yet if the Americans discovered that he had been sheltering the fugitives, he could face severe consequences. As the pressure grew, greed eventually defeated loyalty. On July 21, 2003, Nawaf Zeidan contacted the US military. He reported that Saddam Hussein's two sons were hiding inside his villa in Mosul. He also demanded the reward and asked the Americans to guarantee his personal safety. At first, the military suspected the information was false. They had already received many unreliable tips, but this report appeared unusually credible. The US military sent a team to Mosul to observe the villa from a distance. After gathering intelligence, they confirmed that Uday and Qusay were inside. The military did not delay. A complete battle plan was prepared. The villa would be surrounded from every direction. At 10 o'clock, American forces completed their deployment. Tanks, machine guns, and armored vehicles moved into position. Helicopters hovered above, snipers occupied rooftops, and all roads were blocked. Through loudspeakers, soldiers shouted in Arabic and ordered everyone inside to surrender. They promised personal safety if the brothers came out peacefully. There was no response. The Americans prepared to enter the house. Then gunfire suddenly erupted. Bullets poured from the doors and windows. The military realized that Uday and Qusay had no intention of surrendering. The people inside were armed with rifles, grenades, and large amounts of ammunition. Qusay's son, Mustafa, also took up a weapon and joined the fight. American forces returned fire. Every attempt to enter the villa was met by intense resistance. After an hour, several American soldiers had been wounded. The US Army called for air support. A helicopter launched a missile at the building, seriously damaging the villa. People inside used furniture as cover, moved between rooms, and continued firing. The battle lasted for 6 hours. Eventually, the gunfire stopped. American soldiers moved cautiously through the ruins, fearing an ambush. The first floor was empty. When they reached the upper level, they found 4 bodies: Uday Hussein, Qusay Hussein, Qusay's son Mustafa, and a bodyguard. 2 days later, on July 24th, the US military held a press conference. Officials announced the deaths of Saddam Hussein's 2 sons and released photographs of the remains. The images were intended to end all doubt. Across Iraq, the reaction was divided. Victims of the brothers' brutality celebrated, while Saddam's supporters were devastated. A week after the announcement, the remains were secretly transported back to their homeland. Small funeral ceremonies were held quietly, and Nawaf Zeidan, the relative who betrayed them, received the $30 million reward. US intelligence helped Zeidan and his family leave Iraq permanently, change their identities, and settle overseas. The military never publicly revealed all the details of the informant's identity, but local sources in Iraq soon leaked the story. The man who had protected Saddam's sons had ultimately traded them for money. For months, Uday and Qusay had escaped a massive military search. They hid in an ordinary villa protected by people they trusted, but their hiding place was revealed by someone inside their own circle. The brothers had survived the fall of Baghdad, months of military searches, and a multi-million-dollar manhunt. But they could not survive betrayal. Their story ended in the ruins of a Mosul villa, while the question of loyalty remained behind. When fear and greed become stronger than family, who can you still trust?